Hello and welcome to homework R.04. This is all about polynomials. Alright, so let's take a look at number 1. When 3a squared minus 2a plus 5 is subtracted from a squared plus a minus 1, the result is... Alright, so there's two major pieces that you have to remember here. One is that the word from means first. So anything that comes after the from is what we're going to put first. And the other piece is even though they don't show them, we need to put both of these in parentheses. So when we write it down below, it's going to be parentheses a squared plus a minus 1 subtracted by 3a squared minus 2a plus 5. And that's all inside of parentheses. Now, to actually do the problem, what we have to remember is that this one has a positive 1 in front, and this one has a negative 1 in front. The positive one is not going to change anything, so these stay exactly the same. The negative one is going to change things. It's basically going to flip all the signs. So we're going to have a minus 3a squared, a plus 2a, and a minus 5. Now at this point we need to start combining like terms. So we have 1a squared minus 3a squared is negative 2a squared. 1a plus 2a is 3a. And negative 1 minus 5 is going to be negative 6. And let's hope that answer is up there. And yes, it is. It's choice 2 here. Negative 2a squared plus 3a minus 6. All right, number 2 says the sum of 3x squared plus 4x minus 2 and x squared minus 5x plus 3 is. Now again, we can put the parentheses on this one. We can say 3x squared plus 4x minus 2 plus, let's make sure we have room here, x squared minus 5x plus 3. Now, the nice thing about this problem is they both have positive 1s in front. And as we saw in the last one, positive 1 isn't going to change anything, so you could almost just do this one without the parentheses, but I don't think it's a bad habit to get into just so you don't goof up the subtraction problems. Okay, so there we go, and now we can combine like terms. 3 plus 1 is 4x squared, 4 minus 5 is minus 1x, negative 2 plus 3 is a plus 1, and again let's hope that's one of our choices, and there it is, choice 2, 4x squared minus 1x plus 1. Notice they don't have the 1 there, but those two things are the same. Alright, number 3, if 2x squared minus 4x plus 6 is subtracted from 5x squared plus 8x minus 2, the difference is, so again there's our word from, which means first, and then even though they didn't put in the parentheses, we have to remember that there are parentheses around both of these. So we have parentheses 5x squared plus 8x minus 2 subtracted by parentheses 2x squared minus 4x plus 6. Okay? So this one has the positive 1 in front, this one has the negative 1 in front. The positive 1 is not going to change anything, so that leaves us with 5x squared plus 8x minus 2. The negative 1 is basically going to flip our sign, so now we have a minus 2x squared, a plus 4x, and a minus 6. And now we can start combining like terms. 5 minus 2 is 3x squared. 8x plus 4x is positive 12x, and negative 2 minus 6 is a negative 8. So we've got 3x squared plus 12x minus 8, which hopefully is one of our choices, and there it is, choice 1. Okay, so that's all the adding and subtracting stuff. Now let's take a look at some of the factoring stuff. number 4 says factor completely, which we learned means to factor twice. The first step is going to be to take out a GCF, and the second step is going to be to do either multiply and add or dots. Multiply and add is for when there are 3 terms. Dots is for when there are only 2 terms. So depending on which situation you have is going to dictate what you have to do. Alright, so first thing we have to do is take out a GCF of 3x squared, 15x, and negative 42. Now, if you know that, awesome. If not, what you can do is you can go to your calculator, and then you can go to Math, scroll over to Num, and then you need to get down to choice 9, and you can either hit down a bunch of times or you can hit up once, and then you can pick 2 of the numbers. You can't type in all 3 at once, so I might type in 42 and 15 and get 3. Now normally you would have to do it again, and you would use the answer that you got and whatever number is left over. But in this case, it's kind of silly to do the GCF of 3 and 3 because it's just going to be 3. So we will start, so since our GCF was 3, we will start by dividing each of these by 3. The 3 stays out front, so then we have 3 parentheses x squared plus 5x minus 14. Okay. Now we have 3 terms inside of our parentheses, so that means we're using the multiply and add technique. So we're multiplying to negative 14 because that's the number without the x, and we're adding to a positive 5. That's the number with the x. Now the way we can use our calculator to help us on these is we go to our y equals, we will type in, what number is it? Negative 14 divided by x. We'll go to second graph, and then I like to start right here at positive 1 and just go down through the list. So 1 minus 14, does that give us positive 5? Nope. 2 minus 7, does that give us positive 5? Well, it gives us a negative 5, but not a positive 5. 7 minus 2, is that going to give us a positive 5? Yes, it is. So what that means is this can break down to x plus 7 and x minus 2. Just make sure that that 3 comes down with you. That 3 has to stay with the rest of it. Otherwise, you get a point off. All right, let's take a look at the back. We have more factor completely here, so we're going to start all of these with the GCF, and then we're either going to do dots or multiply and add. All right, so let's take a look at this one. All right, we've got to do the GCF of 3 and 27. Now we can use the calculator, but on this one I can tell you it's just going to be 3. Now, if we look at these, they both have an a, which means we're going to be able to take out an a. Only one of them has an x, so we're not going to be able to take out an x. But this one has an a to the first, this one has an a to the first. Normally we pick the smaller exponent, but because they're both a to the first, it doesn't really matter. So our GCF is 3a to the first. So 3a to the first, 3a to the first. The 3a comes out front. Now I could put to the first here, but I'm just going to leave it off this time. They mean the same thing. 3 divided by 3 is 1. The a's are going to cancel out. When we divide, we subtract exponents, so 1 minus 1 is 0, which means they cancel out. And we're basically just left with 1x squared, or we can just write that as x squared. 27 divided by 3 is 9, and then 1 minus 1 is 0 again, so those will cancel out. Now, this time, if we look inside of the parentheses, there are only 2 terms, so that leads us to dots. All right, and the way that dots work is we basically say, all right, what's the square root of x squared? And that would be x. What's the square root of 9? That would be 3. And then to get a negative 9, one of those is going to have to be positive, and one of those is going to have to be negative. Because what you have to remember is positive times positive is positive, negative times negative is positive. The only way to get a negative when you multiply is either a positive times a negative or a negative times a positive. So again, the order doesn't matter of these, but one of them needs to be positive, one of them needs to be negative. All right, let's take a look at number 6 here. Factor completely. So again, we're going to start with our GCF. The GCF of 5 and 80 is going to be 5. Okay, so let me just write that over here. Our GCF is 5. On this one, we're not going to be able to take out a letter because while this one has an N, this one does not, so we're stuck just using the 5. The 5 comes out front. We get n squared minus 16. Again, there are only 2 terms inside the parentheses, so that means we're using dots. So the square root of n squared is just n. The square root of 16 is 4. And then again, because that's a negative 16, one of these is going to have to be positive, one of these is going to have to be negative. All right. Let's take a look at the final problem here. So again, factor completely. So we need to find a GCF of 4 and 36. The number piece is going to be 4. Now on this one, this has an x to the third, this has an x to the first. Since they both have the letter x, we can take out a letter. Now, when they have different exponents, we have to use whichever one is smaller. So this is a 3, this is a 1. We have to use the 4x to the 1 because that one's smaller. All right, so we're going to divide both of these by 4x to the first, 4x to the first. The 4x comes out front. 4 divided by 4 is 1. X cubed divided by x to the first, we subtract the exponents, so 3 minus 1 is 2, so this is x squared. I could write the 1 in front, but I don't need to. And then 36 divided by 4 is going to be a minus 9. X to the first divided by x to the first, 1 minus 1 is 0, so those cancel out, and we're just left with 4x times x squared minus 9. That's our first step. Our second step is to again do dots, and I know it's dots because there are only 2 terms inside of my parentheses. So the 4x comes down. The square root of x squared is x, so that's what goes in the front. The square root of 9 is 3, so that's what goes in the back. And again, because I want a negative 9 here, one of these has to be positive and the other one has to be negative. Okay? All right, I hope this was helpful. This concludes this homework, so have a nice day.